Welcome to our Balancing the Future year-end episode. I'm Dana Clémençon.
And I'm Micah Schweizer. On this show, we delve into the world of science and technology and explore its transformative impact on our lives.
On this holiday episode, we'll be bringing you some of our favorite content that didn't quite make it into the episodes we've released so far. But before we begin, in the spirit of holiday, Micah, I'm curious, what are your plans for this holiday season?
I think holidays are always the time for catching up on podcast episodes when it's missed. Personally, I'm really hoping for some snow.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
How about you?
I'm having family visit from Canada, so I'm really excited to show them the snowy Swiss mountains.
That sounds great, Dana. In addition to the cuts from existing episodes we'll listen back to, in the second half of the show, we're going to give you a little taste of the conversations we're excited to share with you next year in 2025.
Make sure you stick around because we have some fascinating topics lined up for next year. Shall we get into it, Micah?
Absolutely. Let's jump in with a clip from our first ever episode. That was with Stephen Lang, Vice President of Science and Technology at California Cultured.
You might remember that we spoke to Stephen about cultivated or lab-grown meat and its potential to revolutionize our future diets.
One topic we didn't really get into, though, was the potential of manipulating the nutritional content of cultivated meat. Let's listen to Stephen.
I mean, if you can essentially nutrient load a foodstuff, people then would eat less of it. You know, there are health benefits to eating particular meat like seafood with omega-3 fatty acids. We can engineer that in the future into whatever cultivated meat we want to. So there's all kinds that we can think about on the nutritional side.
Dana, what gets me about this is the idea that you could put nutrients from one food into another food, so that, you could essentially have like beef with the benefits of seafood, for instance. And that really feels quite futuristic to me.
Yeah, definitely, especially as we have this growing population and so many challenges to feed everyone on the planet with this nutritious food. It really feels like we'll be able to open up a whole new way of how we consume food and make sure that we stay healthy.
It could have really interesting implications for, as he's saying, with the relationship with food in terms of quantity or in terms of the nutrients that we get from the food we eat. So really some fascinating topics that he's looking into here and grappling with.
Next up, we have a clip from our conversation with Jan Lichtenberg, CEO and co-founder of Inspiro. They develop a wide range of 3D cell cultures for drug development and testing.
In the episode, Jan gave an interesting example of the real-world effect that animal testing can have on drug efficacy. Here's Jan.
A good example is paracetamol, right? Everybody takes it. If you have a cold, it's great painkiller. And it's quite liver toxic. It's one of the top reasons in the US for liver transplantations because people overdose on paracetamol. And it has been tested on rats as a standard, but rats miss a specific liver enzyme that turns paracetamol into a toxic byproduct. So rats are a lot less affected by that safety concern than humans. So it shows you that there is a bit of a lack of translation when it comes to animal models, and you miss out on certain information if you're not testing long enough.
Do you think that if paracetamol was tested with a 3D cell culture today, if it was being tested to be put on the market, would it go through? Would we have this mass acceptance of the drug?
That is a great question. And I think probably it would have gone through, but it would have been immediately black boxed as it is today.
What stood out to me in what Jan is saying here is that the existing or previous methodology we've had for testing drugs means that actually once a drug is approved, it still gets tested in the real world as people use the drug. And so I find it really interesting that one could essentially bypass that step that we currently have and recognize the drug's risks and limitations before it's actually released for use by people.
Yeah, I think this point specifically that Jan made about paracetamol really illustrates how we're able to now, with this type of technology, make drugs a lot safer for everyone who consumes them.
Lastly, from our class of 2024, we have a clip from our conversation with Manfred Zinn. He's professor at the Institute of Life Sciences at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Sion, Switzerland.
Manfred has been involved in bioplastic and biopolymer research since the 1970s.
And right at the end of the conversation, he talked to me about an example of a textile that was made from bioplastics that he had with him. So let's listen.
Actually, so this is a textile that is knitted and is kind of a stocking or a sock also.
Oh, it's almost transparent, right?
Yeah, but that's because the meshes are not so dense. And
Okay. What does it feel like, this textile?
I think there is still some work needed. It's like more like a nylon part. Huh?
Okay, yes.
So it's not like cotton, I would say.
So slippery.
It's more artificial. But there are also in textile industry, there are so many different processing steps that allow functionalization of the surface, making material more glossy or matte or whatever. So the touch is also different.
Wow, that's super interesting. I was sad to miss this episode, but really, really cool. I had no idea that biopolymers or bioplastics could be made into a textile.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I think we are seeing plastics increasingly become part of the textile world with recycled plastics, for instance, but to use biopolymers deliberately for textile is something I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, and the sustainability of this would be huge, right? Because with fast fashion trends that so many people adopt right now, when you give away your clothes, right, you think that they're gone, but where are they going? Often they're ending up in landfills or on beaches in our oceans, right?
Yeah, there's an estimated 92 million tons of textile waste. At least that was the estimate in 2020. So what is interesting to me is if bioplastic-based textiles could bypass the microplastics problem associated with plastic-based textiles, if they had some sort of increased biodegradability or perhaps some sort of increased recyclability, I think it's very interesting things on the horizon here.
Absolutely. Let's move on to some clips from our upcoming episodes. We're kicking off 2025 with a conversation that's out of this world.
Magdalena Herova is a biologist at the European Space Agency in the User Support and Operations Center.
In her role, Magdalena makes complex biological experiments space-ready. She breaks them down step by step, crafting clear, foolproof guides that astronauts can rely on.
And sometimes it's tough to predict the challenges an experiment might face in the unique conditions of space. Let's listen to Magdalena.
So I give a simple example of a not even biological experiment, but a video for school kids where we had a little robot and the astronaut was supposed to show that robot on a video. And because of some reasons, the robot didn't have a battery, but had a cord. And I told the group that I was sending this robot there, I said, go and play the video through. Pretend you're the astronaut and just do it all and then tell me, do we need to do any updates? And they thought it's too stupid, it's too simple. So they never did it. They just thought it through, but they never played it through. And then I went and said, well, look at the cord. It has 1 meter. If I stand and the plug is on the ground, which it is in the ISS, I will have the robot around, height of my belly and maybe even lower. So this is something really simple and you only find out by trying, playing the whole scenario through.
I found this conversation so interesting because, as we mentioned, what Magdalena does is she works through all the individual steps that are needed for an experiment in space to go as it should. And here we have just a simple scenario. An astronaut films a video showing a robot. And yet we have the problem that the astronaut and the robot can't both be in the picture because the robot has a cord and the cord has to plug into the floor. And so, now you don't have the astronaut and the robot together in the shot. And to think that something so basic could go wrong in a space environment makes me think, wow, for actual complex biological experiments, the level of detail that's needed to make sure that this works, because you really only have one chance, right? You send the sample to space and then that's it. Either the experiment works or it doesn't. It really stood out to me how careful Magdalena has to be in her work.
So just to clarify, Micah, because I unfortunately had to sit out this episode as well, was this actually filmed in space?
So exactly, that was the goal, or that was the brief, was to film a video with an astronaut and a robot. And the cinematography didn't work because the cord was too short.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. So her work, like we said, very complex.
Even when it's basic, right? Where's the plug?
Right.
How long's the cord?
Yeah. Yeah, super illustration.
We have a very important issue in microbiology at the moment, which is the spread of antimicrobial resistant genes in bacteria through environmental water, so through wastewater. We have really a pronounced increase of resistance in infections in general, and people are unfortunately dying or getting really sick without possibility of treatments because the bacteria are just too resistant to what's available to treat infection. Between 10 and 50 million people dying per year of infections that are not treatable. I think this is pretty accurate.
Between 10 and 50 million people dying every year simply because the microbes that have made them sick are resistant to antibiotics.
Yeah, and we have this brilliant solution that has saved so many people's lives. It's really staggering to see how this can turn on us.
That antibiotics can be so beneficial and so dangerous at the same time. And now the need for really rigorous testing to make sure that we're tracking these microbes so that we can understand their implications for public health and find out where the risks are for these types of infections and these resistant bacteria.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I took away is that with this testing, we really need to be able to understand the problem so that we can solve it.
Which kind of is the basis of all problem solving, right? Until you grasp the scope and nature of the problem, you cannot actually solve it. And I think that's a thread that we see throughout the conversations in this show, is that the guests that we're talking with are fundamentally trying to understand a problem so that they can offer a solution that shows a better way forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our last clip is from our colleague, Simon Taylor. He works in new battery technology here with us at METTLER Toledo.
In this episode, we talk a lot about what the future looks like for battery technology. And Micah, since you weren't involved in the taping of this episode, what you're going to hear is a lot of what's coming in the electric vehicle industry. So let's listen.
I think we're going to just see generational leaps in battery technology quality over the next 5 to 10 years. And there will be a point where people are no longer talking about so-called range anxiety. How long do I have before my battery runs out, right? That's what they call range anxiety in the EV world. That won't be an issue 5 years from now. Nobody will care that their car does 500 or 700 miles because it will just become normal and it's acceptable. And battery technology will get better so people can charge more quickly.
So Dana, I don't know if this was part of the history of the combustion engine, but obviously gas tanks have gotten larger over the years. And I wonder if range anxiety was even something way at the beginning when people had to worry about where the next gas station was and how much fuel they could fit in their tank.
I would say it absolutely was, right? People would, I would assume, would bring gas along with them in their car, right? And we don't even think to do that now.
No, we just assume the tank's big enough and when it runs low, there's a fueling station where we need it.
Exactly. As electric vehicles gain more and more popularity, the batteries are going to get better. There's obviously going to be more infrastructure to support this type of car.
And I feel like that's what we see with so many technological developments. At the beginning, there are all these questions and there's all this uncertainty. And then it's like there's this moment where there's a shift and those simply go away. And so in this case, range anxiety is simply not a thing anymore in 5 years.
And you know what that makes me think of, Micah, is from our first episode with Stephen Lang. We made a really funny point and we joked about it a little bit, was this bioreactor in the kitchen and
Exactly.
how absolutely abstract that seems now, but hey, in 50 years, could be, right?
Who knows? Exactly.
That's all for today. Whether you're celebrating or not, we want to wish you a very happy holiday period.
And we'll leave you now with one more clip from Simon, where he shares his optimistic vision for a sustainable future.
See you next year.
I think the first time this year, the use of coal in some European countries went down to zero, right? It wasn't just a matter of a percentage, it was zero. And of course, there is still gas and there are still ways of generating electricity using fossil fuels, but we're getting there, right? It's moving forward, maybe not as quickly as I would like to see for my children, but I think the trend is good. The growth in cars is good. The use of green energy is positive, and that gives me some hope, at least.